just a few words to welcome you, to welcome everybody, and thank you to the persons who are leading this webinar. And what I want to say, I am Stefania Romenti, I am president of EUPRERA, and EUPRERA is the European Public Relations Education Research Association, and this webinar is part of a calendar of a series of webinars which have the objective, the aim to make visible the work done by our members. And specifically, this webinar is part of a thematic network, the network about digital transformation and public relations. And this network is concerned with the understanding of new trends characterizing the digital communication field. So thank you so much to the members who have organized this webinar, and I want to leave the floor to Grazia and enjoy this seminar. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Stefania. I would like to share quickly my screen. So only to introduce the topic of discussion. So this is, as Stefania said, is a webinar included in the activities provided by the thematic network about digital transformation and the public relation. We decided to start this talk by facing the topic of the metaverse, because it is a quite important topic. We decided to, of course, facing this phenomenon, as we can call it, but with Professor Kim, that I will introduce in a bit, we will talk about. I would like only to introduce the topic and explain why we have decided to talk about metaverse. First of all, because this is not a simple trending topic. This is a report provided by a financial organization, Citi, that talk about the investment made by companies in the metaverse, and this is a phenomenon. And as you can see, in the next 10 years, they foresee an investment about 8 or 30 trillion of dollars. So we are talking about a digital environment that is not only a digital environment, but that can attract a lot of investment. And when we talk about investment, we talk about different forms of investment. So as you probably know or have heard, especially for what concerns the metaverse environment, different forms of investment have started to be created and to be spread. So we have the stocks, but we have also cryptocurrency. You have the possibility to buy or to rent metaverse land on metaverse buildings. So organization can acquire specific places within the metaverse where to sell their product, the real life product. We have also different forms of new currencies and new funds like the EFT and the NFT. So why it is so important? Because of course it's not only the attention and the interest towards the metaverse as a digital environment, but of course there is an economic system that has been developed around. So here you are only a few examples of a new organization specialized, especially in a micro and cryptocurrency investment. And it is a quite important phenomenon because this is cross-industry. This is only some example, only to introduce you the topic, example of companies that have invested and take the first moves into the metaverse environment. So we have online retailing industry with Alibaba, Amazon, and Walmart that tried to exploit the retailing dynamic of a metaverse. We have the fashion industry that start to move money and to make investment, a strong investment, like for instance Nike, but especially the luxury industry. We have the sector of entertainment industry and the gamification industry that of course started to exploit the occasion in order to investigate how to convert metaverse dynamic into opportunities to create new clients, to identify new stakeholders, to interact with new publics. And finally, the last industry is the technology one, because also the hard techno industry is started to see the metaverse phenomenon as a possible interest for their activity. But in any case, I don't want to exploit so much time, because I would like to, we have an expertise, we have a researcher, is a professor that does studies and has explored the phenomenon. So I would like to thank really the Professor Kim to accept this invitation to talk about the metaverse. So what we will discuss is about the state of art of metaverse phenomenon, and especially what is the agenda for future research about. So thank you, Professor Kim. I leave the floor.
Thank you so much for introducing me, and also setting up nice starting points, to talk about the metaverse. And as you said, the metaverse is really emerging, but it is not a new concept. And yeah, and the industry is expanding in many ways. So this is a great time to talk about the metaverse in a more scholastic way. So we can think about and plan for the future research, related to the public relations, and for me, advertising, and also for many people, communication in general. Thank you so much for inviting me, to this wonderful webinar. And I would like to really thank EUPRERA for inviting me over to have this opportunity to meet the people loving and participating in EUPRERA, and having this opportunity to talk about the metaverse in a more academic way. Thank you so much. So should I share my screen? Okay.
For sure, thanks.
Let's see. Okay, let me see. Okay. Can you see
we are able to see it. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. So it is great to meet everyone here. And my name is Jooyoung Kim, as Grazia introduced. I am a professor of advertising at the University of Georgia in the United States. And it is great to have this time to talk about metaverse, which is really relevant to the communications in a more focused way for public relations and advertising. So before we begin, I would like to first talk about why it is important to look out and think about metaverse as public relations and advertising researchers. First, it is new media. It is, the metaverse concept has been, discussed from many years ago, but it has become a new media platform for the communication professionals and also for consumers to use. And also, there is uncertainty about metaverse. Metaverse is an old concept, but it has never been realized in its full capacity and in our full imagination. So there is uncertainty around the metaverse. So we need to keep thinking about it to clarify what it is and what it might be in the future. And also there is certainty about metaverse, which means metaverse is coming, and it is certain that we will have to be experiencing the metaverse in the near future. So it is new media. So it is important for any researchers and professionals who are dealing with media and it is certain that it is coming, but we don't know what it is really. So we need to really focus on and think about what this is as academicians and professionals. So before we also talk about what the metaverse is and why it is important, I want to talk about why I became interested in metaverse research. So my research is mostly focused on advertising, and my research focuses on advertising effects in various branding contexts. And recently in 2017, I published an article in Journal of Business Research on TV advertising engagement, how people engage with TV advertising. And through that paper, I was introduced to the concept of immersion, presence, and all sorts of metaverse-related concepts. So from then, I became really interested in the virtual reality and related field. And then this metaverse concept has become more popular. So for advertising researchers such as me, I was thinking first, why metaverse matters for me. So here's a definition of advertising. I'm gonna talk about the definition of public relations, which is harder actually. But advertising is a mediated communication activated by an identifiable sponsor with perceived intent to induce some intended responses from a defined audience. So here, advertising is firstly a mediated communication. So the media is critically necessary for advertising to be defined myself. So it is a mediated communication. So when there is any kind of new media, it is important for advertising researchers to investigate and examine what it is. For public relations, I searched its definition and I borrowed the definition from PRSA website. The public relations there was defined as a strategic communication process that builds mutually beneficial relationships between organizations and their publics. And there are some important scopes and also the work related to public relations such as this. So in a more highlighted way, public relations is about building mutually beneficial relationships. And it is about influencing, engaging, and building relationship with key stakeholders across numerous platforms for shaping and framing public perception about the organization. So thinking about what the public relations does and what it is about, metaverse becomes really obvious, that metaverse is very important for public relations, and public relations will be important in the metaverse world. So I want to bring up the definition of one of the definitions of metaverse, which I defined based on the synthesis from all the research and also trade magazines. A lot of definitions are present, but I tried to synthesize those definitions and created this definition in my editorial in my journal, which is Journal of Interactive Advertising. So metaverse I defined as an interoperated persistent network of shared virtual environments where people can interact synchronously through their avatars with other agents and objects. It's long, but these underlying parts are really necessary to define the metaverse. It has sufficient enough words and also concise enough to define itself solidly. So I mean, it is still working definition. There can be more better definitions down the road, but this is working definition that I created. And I want to make connections between this metaverse definition and advertising and also PR. So PR, as I said, is about influencing, engaging, and building relationship with key stakeholders across numerous platforms to shape perception. And advertising is a mediated communication. And there are three other underlined parts. So the connections we can create is between the public relations and metaverse, the definition wise is there are multiple connections that can be possible. So as you can see, it is an interoperated persistent network, and interoperated means the metaverse world or platforms will be separate, but they should have some interoperated functions and functionalities and also identities. So in that case, the interoperation should be applied to the numerous platforms concept, the definition element. And it is a persistent network, which means between different metaverse platforms. For example, your identity should be persistent between and among different metaverse platforms. And also the same kind of setting that you saw in one metaverse field. For example, like when you log into Amazon and then log out and then you log in back, the settings and all sorts of things that you see on Amazon.com, at the time should be persistent, should be consistent. So the persistency is really important to build relationships. So it is also important connections that we can make. And also it is shared virtual environment. So shared environment can help people to shape and frame the perceptions for themselves about something. And interaction is important in the metaverse, and interaction is necessary for influencing and engaging the public. So, and also agents and objects are, of course, stakeholders and organizations for the public relations. So, as we can see that the definition of metaverse, it is quite relevant, very closely relevant to what public relations does. So it is important for the public relations professionals and academicians to understand what the metaverse is, so we can be there, be prepared. On the other hand, advertising also has connections with metaverse because advertising uses the media environment, and also it requires the metaverse requires interaction between the avatars and agents and objects. So from the interactions, there can be responses from the audience. So a lot of connections can be made between metaverse and public relations, and also metaverse and advertising. So it is very important for us to examine what advertising and what public relations can be done on the metaverse. So this was enough academic introduction, and we'll come back to a little more theoretical aspects. But before we do that, I want to talk about a little bit of origin and history about metaverse. There have been some key historical moments of metaverse. The origin, of course, probably many of you already know. It was originated from the Neil Stephen's novel Snow Crash in 1992. So it is what like 02, 12, and 22nd, so like 30 years old, right? And there was in 2007, there was industry and actually main industry movement and a think tank type gathering, which was called the Metaverse Roadmap, which I'm going to introduce shortly after. And then Steven Spielberg made a film, which is titled Ready Player One. If you have watched it, that's great. If you haven't, you might want to watch it if you are interested in what the metaverse is gonna look like. It's a movie, so it kind of shows like a bad and positive aspects of metaverse, but it doesn't. The movie doesn't call the word metaverse, but you can watch it. It is called Oasis in that movie. And then after that, last year, Facebook changed its company name to Meta in October 28th, and NVIDIA also claimed that they want to be the leader in the metaverse world for the infrastructuring. So they created something called NVIDIA Omniverse, and Microsoft is also moving toward also actually in the metaverse competition. And as we are hearing, Apple, I think, is considering to move into metaverse business. So we will have to see. So in the Neil Stephens metaverse, it's an urban environment. It is developed along a single 100-meter wide road, the street, and there's an owner of the street. And also people need to access that world, that virtual world, through a global fiber optic network, which is owned by this person, Bob Life. And it's interestingly, there are two kinds of ways for people to access the metaverse. One is through the personal terminals for kind of rich people, so they can have within their house, there is a kind of terminal system or machine that they can use to log into the metaverse. And there's also low quality public terminal in booths. So it is also, there seems to be some sort of access divide, between rich and poor in this novel as well. And gargoyles are those people who always wear the VR headset. So they kind of look like they're wearing the headset all the time. So they're called the gargoyles. And user experience is usually first-person perspective through avatars of any form, and there is certain limit, such as height, and the transportation can be done only by foot or vehicle. So 1992, long ago, the concept of metaverse was born, and this is a novel and 30 years ago, so we don't know if this is going to be actually realized, but I think this can be one of the interesting ways to describe what the metaverse is going to look like. So the hype is really high. For example, Deloitte, the global consulting firm, launches unlimited reality, an experience and impact offering for virtual worlds. So they have created something called unlimited reality unit, and also Dimension 10 Studio, where their clients and the consultants can gather together to collaborate on the client's business going into metaverse. So they're kind of trying to help their clients to be successful in the metaverse. So they're really moving fast in that regard. So, the chairman and CEO of Deloitte said, we're excited to launch Deloitte's unlimited reality offering and the Dimension 10 Studio to help our clients take advantage of the exponential growth in virtual worlds and economies. So there's huge potential. So global consulting firms are really gazing, the opportunities emerging for the metaverse. Walmart, interestingly, is also quietly preparing to enter the metaverse. Why Walmart? Because they see the potential for being in the metaverse, so people can shop, right, and have some shopping experiences, more engaging shopping experiences over there. So it's interesting for them to register multiple businesses related to metaverse for their trademark, Walmart. So financial services, namely providing a digital currency and a digital token of value for use by members on an online community through a global computer network. So Walmart is adding this kind of functionality of the business to their trademark. They also want to add kind of retail service, store services featuring virtual merchandise. So they try to sell virtual merchandise. Can they sell it in the physical Walmart? Maybe, but this is mainly for the metaverse that they think they're going to create. Microsoft obviously bought, and this was kind of couple of months ago, but it was just before Microsoft bought the Activision, Blizzard, and Vogue also made the fashion show in the metaverse, Decentraland. So companies are investigating and investing their opportunities in the metaverse. Best Buy could cash in from rise of the metaverse because people might want to buy better hardware, to experience the metaverse in a more better way. So Best Buy might be another company that can benefit from the metaverse. Decentraland, for example, sells the virtual real estate lands in the metaverse. And there are also people, selling and buying mortgages, to purchase the lands in the metaverse. So the virtual real estate is also booming. But as many of you also know, there are some anti-hype and some cooling off is being witnessed. So Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse vision is costing shareholders dearly. As you know, the Facebook, the Meta's stock price has really halved, in the past couple of months. So it's based on a bad signal that is giving to the investors, because investors might also know the metaverse is coming, but if it doesn't come in and very activated and popularized within, for example, 5 years, then there's no really investment interest in that stock. So there is that kind of difficulty. And Epic Games vice president, his name is Mark Petit, said metaverse interest is waning. It is disappearing. It's cooling down. We need to stop and think about what really metaverse is, what it can really give us. And MetaX projects at Facebook Reality Labs, the division behind the metaverse push. So Meta is restructuring also their investment in the metaverse. Big question surrounding metaverse, early Facebook investor Reid Hoffman said, is one of the technologies where it's inevitable, it happens. So there's certainty. But when and how is a very big question. So if it is not going to happen in the immediate future, then financially speaking, for investors, it is not a good investment target. So there is a future, but it's not near. So there's a problem. iPod creator said he isn't buying the metaverse hype. You can do physical touch, and all sorts of things that you do in the real life, cannot be done in the metaverse. So he doesn't buy it. So there are hype, and also there's an anti-hype. So it is kind of mixed nowadays. However, we can still see some continued investment in a more serious and more gradual way, rather than just like a hype. So for example, the metaverse is already here. This EdTech magazine said, and K-12 schools, that's like for public school system in the United States, are using it for education. So as you can see, the Facebook has plans to invest $150 million in virtual reality learning experience in the metaverse. Roblox already offers the plans for a variety of subjects and age groups, also providing millions of dollars in grants to help more education-focused organizations such as Project Leadway. So there is a more granular, it's still top-down kind of investment, because it is being done by big tech companies. But there are more than entertainment in industry being affected by metaverse. Also, there's some saying that there are about top 10 metaverse platforms that will replace social media in the future. There are some lists, if you just like type this in your on your Google, then you will see what those 10 metaverse platforms are. So it was a little long introduction, but I think it was necessary to talk about the hypes and de-hype, and also some new trials, in the direction of metaverse. So what is the metaverse anyway? So I want to go back to 2007 when industry professionals gathered together to imagine and think about what the metaverse is. So this is the PDF file screen capture from their white paper published in 2007. So Metaverse Roadmap is the title. It says Pathways to the 3D Web. And this is a project which is cross-industry. A lot of people from industries, from healthcare professionals to entertainment, a lot of different kind of industry professionals gather together to co-imagine what the metaverse would be. And I'm talking about 2007. So they said, what happens when video games meet Web 2.0? When virtual worlds meet geospatial maps of the planet? When simulations get real and life and business go virtual? When you use a virtual Earth to navigate the physical Earth and your avatar becomes your online agent, what happens is metaverse. So this is what they kind of imagined and suggested in 2007, and it's a very informative document that I would recommend anyone to read. So they suggested this interesting chart showing that metaverse can be composed of these 4 elements: live logging, virtual worlds, mirror worlds, and augmented reality. Augmented reality is something like yeah, I mean the Pokemon Go can be augmented reality. I mean, there is a reality, a physical reality, and there is additional layer added to the physical reality to enhance the information. Live logging is like social media, and virtual worlds is completely virtual 3D environment that is simulated fully digitally. And mirror worlds is like a Google map, sort of like the world is transferred to the physical world is transferred to the digital world, and there's kind of digital kind of twin between the two worlds. And for those 4 different kind of elements, they created 2 factors that can set those 4 different elements in different spot. So more intimate side and external side, more augmented side and more simulated side. So simulation augmentation is on one continuum, and intimate and external is on another continuum, and that divides those different elements. And between those different elements, let's say like a live logging and virtual worlds, these are, for example, like there are 4 different important aspects that are on the border between different elements. So between live logging, which is like social media, and complete virtual worlds, the identity and interaction aspect will be important. Augmented reality and live logging side, between that, the interface and the networks will be important. Between the augmented reality and the mirror worlds, the sensors, and everywhere, the wearing device, it can be the augmented reality glass or something else that can enhance, that can transmit the information for you to view. between real worlds and virtual worlds, models and immersion can be also important factors. So they saw the metaverse as a junction rather than a space. So there is, when I went to the American Academy of Advertising annual conference in March this year, my colleague Grace Ann and Grace Ann actually did a pre-conference about metaverse, and I participated as a panelist, and the other panelists also gathered together, and we talked about what really is the metaverse, and their point was, is metaverse? First question was, is metaverse a thing or concept? And we all agreed it is more concept than a thing. And as you see here, in 2007, the industry professionals together, co-imagined that metaverse is a junction and the convergence of virtually enhanced physical reality and the physically persistent virtual space. So somewhere between the reality and virtual reality, there is metaverse. But that is a kind of concept for converging those two. So I want to talk about a little more academic way to define the metaverse, and that is actually the definition that I already suggested earlier today, which is based on my editorial published in the Journal of Interactive Advertising. I suggested 7 core elements that can define the metaverse. And to remember them better, I just remember them by VIIICCE. Is virtual. The first element is virtual environment, and then the immersion, interactivity, interoperability. Those are 3 I's. And then concurrence and continuity as 2 C's, and then embodied actors. The reason why I listed these a little differently from this VICE is that the later 4, concurrence, interactivity, interoperability, and continuity, they are actually, we can see that, we can experience that in the Web 1.0 and 2.0, actually. We can still concurrently communicate with others on Web 2.0, and we can make interactions, and different websites and different mobile platforms are interoperable, at least on the same, at least when they are on the same OS, like a Mac or Windows. And continuity of the identity of people and contents are also there. The first 3, virtual environment, embodied actors, and immersion, those are actually what we call collectively reality tech based. So virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, and all together extended reality are also important elements for the metaverse. So combining those 2, reality tech and Web 2.0, which includes Web 1.0, together becomes the metaverse. So this is, the core elements that we need to remind ourselves whenever we examine the metaverse. So these elements are really important, key elements for defining metaverse. So you saw this before, but I define metaverse as an interoperated persistent network of shared virtual environments where people can interact synchronously through their avatars with other agents and objects. A lot of times these days, I hear the term metaverse being used incorrectly. Virtual reality and metaverse, they're not the same. And say like Roblox is a metaverse, or Decentraland is a metaverse. they are metaverse platforms, but they're not really metaverse itself. So it's like we know there's like a google.com, amazon.com, and we saw Walmart too, but in walmart.com, there are different kind of websites, right? We do not call individual website internet, right? Internet is something umbrella term and concept that encompass all different sorts of mobile and desktop websites and apps all together. That is the internet, right? So metaverse should be viewed such as that. Metaverse is kind of umbrella term and concept that can embrace different kind of platforms under it. So we need to be clear about what the metaverse is. So it is network rather than a thing or site. So metaverse is about connections simulated in reality. The connections was emphasized by Mark Zuckerberg when he introduced the Meta, the company's name on October 28th last year. So the connections is important, in the metaverse. And metaverse, the reason for metaverse to help us is to make connections between people and objects. The connections can be made between things and places, and NVIDIA Omniverse is helping that, helping us and helping the industry to make things and places connected in the metaverse. And companies such as Meta Horizon World or Microsoft business environment, that's all for connecting people and functions what they do. So metaverse is about connections of people and all sorts of other things. And as you can see here, I think that the number of companies and the scope has already expanded a lot. This was just like a month ago when I prepared this presentation, but it might have expanded a lot in the past months. But metaverse ecosystem is already there. As you can see, there is a metaverse. There are metaverse gateways, and there are also companies that develop and help creating avatars and user interface and immersion related technology companies and social media that are more applicable to the metaverse, and also all sorts of other multiple layers of companies working together to create something big, which is going to be the metaverse. So the definition is there. Of course, the definition is still evolving, and it might change into something else. But I think the essence will be still there. So now, after we talked about the definition of the metaverse and why it is important, now let's step into a little further to kind of think about how communication can happen in the metaverse. This is really important for any communication researcher, especially for public relations and advertising researchers for their strategic communications. There are multiple communication models in the literature. And for example, Aristotle's model of communication, which was like BC 300, a really old communication model, speaker, speech, and then there's occasion, then there's audience, then there's the effect. That's pretty neat theory, developed in BC 300. And there's a Shannon Weaver model of communication, as we know. Information source is there, and then there's transmitter, there's channel and receiver, and destination. So in the process, there's noise. So like a source and receiver kind of communication is here. One thing that I want to introduce, not introduce, but one model that is helpful for understanding how communication might happen in the metaverse is something called transactional communication model. As you can see, there's person A and person B. Person A and person B, no one is really source or receiver. They're communicating, as a communicator, as communicators. So there's message exchange, feedback exchange. Through the process, there is A's field of experience and B's field of experience. Between those experiences in this shared part, there is co-experience created. So that is what the metaverse communication might look like. And then if we think deeper, this is, by the way, my avatar that I created in the Decentraland. I was there to see Samsung's new cell phone, Galaxy S22 launching event. And this was me. And I was looking at my desktop, my avatar standing in front of me, and I can operate that. So when I do that, who am I communicating with? I might communicate with another avatar, but as I do that, I was actually sort of communicating with my avatar as well. So, as you can see, this is me with a green shirt, and there are other people surrounding me, and I was kind of looking at myself when I was communicating. So the avatar and real self, there is some communication going on. So I kind of thought myself, okay, we can add the avatar and real self communication for each side, the communicator side, and for the metaverse research, communication research to be done, we need to make sure that we understand there is that kind of micro communication happening between myself and my avatar, and the other person's avatar and that person's self. So I kind of skipped one slide to talk about this, but I'm going to go back to that particular theory to give you more theoretical perspectives. So as you remember, I said here it's Albert Bandura's concept of emergent interactive agency. This is a very important concept to understand and very applicable to the media environment, media usage nowadays. Bandura kind of suggested there are three kinds of the agencies, like autonomous agency and mechanic agency and emergent interactive agency. When we look at ourselves, so autonomous is like a completely independent agency. Myself is completely independent, but it is very difficult, right? We live in a society, so it is not possible really in many times. Mechanical agency is like you just act to the environment as programmed. So it doesn't really happen in us as well. So emergent interactive agency is a human that is adapting to the environment and finding the motivation by herself and himself to adapt to the environment and make communication. So this is very important concept applicable to the metaverse. So in the metaverse, people through the avatar communicate with other people and also with other agents and objects, but in a more emergent interactive way. So let's talk about some theoretical perspectives now. There are media and person and also engagement related theoretical perspectives theories that I brought. Metaverse is a whole new world that we need to explore as academicians and professionals. with more research-minded. So there are more and more theories applicable. Basically, we need to retest all sorts of communication theories in the metaverse space. So there are a lot of limitless opportunities for researchers to do research for the metaverse field. First, media. Affordance concept is important. The Gibson's affordance concept is important. It is kind of perceived characteristics of objects in the environment that allow an organism to engage with them in specific ways. So, a lot of times people use a doorknob as an example of affordance, something that can enhance affordance. When we see a doorknob on the door, then we kind of feel like, oh, we can interact with the door through the doorknob, so we can open it or close it easily, right? So there is like affordance that is enhanced by the doorknob, but it is also perception, because kind of like someone who doesn't know what the doorknob is, such as like a little baby, has no perceived affordance, through enhanced by the doorknob. So, but affordance is important. Why? In the metaverse space, there are a lot of things, objects that you can interact. Of course, there will be doorknob in the metaverse space if it is virtual reality-based metaverse. And also there are a lot of things that you can touch and interact physically in the virtual world. So then affordance concept becomes really important to enhance the engagement. The immersion concept is also important. It is the ability of a medium to provide users with multiple layers of sensory cues. So immersion is the characteristics and ability of a medium. And there are also depth and breadth concept related to immersion, which is driven by the interaction fidelity, right? It's the quality of the immersion, which is the characteristics of the medium, can be studied by depth and breadth of those media. Mapping is also important concept. Mapping is we know what map is, right? Yeah. And there are three kind of mapping: natural, spatial, and contextual. For example, natural mapping is the ability of a system to map its controls to changes in the mediated environment in a natural and predictable manner. For example, when users can use natural arm and hand actions that they would use in the physical world to manipulate objects in virtual world, the mediated experience would be considered more naturally mapped than using a keyboard or mouse. So in the virtual world, you're no longer using kind of keyboard or mouse, right? Or in the game situation, joystick, you can more freely navigate that space, which is more natural to you. Spatial mapping is it's kind of defined as isomorphic mapping of perceived physical and virtual interaction spaces, referring to the match between the three-dimensional spaces in the physical and the mediated world. So the physical and virtual world, the spaces are kind of matching. So then you have kind of like okay, this space is familiar to me because I know this place from the real world. So you have more knowledge about how to navigate in that space. Contextual mapping is it focuses on the context in which interaction takes place. So when immersive technologies provide the contextual mapping, users can experience high interaction fidelity, because the context matches with the motivation, which is kind of emergent interactive motivation, but at the time the context matches your motivation. So and then next, theoretical perspectives are related to personal related. Okay, in the metaverse, in the virtual world, you're gonna be an embodied agent. Okay, so being embodied person through avatar means it doesn't just mean that you are gonna be a different kind of looking person digitally in the space. It's gonna actually impact you to about how to engage with the objects and things in the metaverse, and also how it looks can derive how you behave in the metaverse as well, which is something we know as Proteus effect, right? So if you wear really nicely in the metaverse, your avatar wears very nice way, then you are more prone to behave nicely, something like that. Okay, the presence concept is also important. Um, the presence is different from immersion. Immersion is the objective capacity of immersive technologies, but the presence is the subjective experience of users as a result of the dynamic relationship between the media features and the user. So, when you feel the presence, and then the meaning can be co-created between yourself and the other interacting party, and then that interaction can generate engagement, and then more engaged people will be will be better off in kind of communication effectiveness, meaning like the more engagement, the more effectiveness in terms of communication. Of course, there is some caveat. This is not always the case. For simple things that say like you want to find out which library to your is closer to your home, you just use your Google Map, right, to find it. You're not going to go into Metaverse to find it, right? So depending on the motivation of your actual digital activity, the Metaverse may be more helpful and beneficial, but it is not always the case. The somatosensory cues concept is also important. This is additional S, because it starts with S, to 3S and 2T, smell, sound, sight, and that's 3 S's, and 2T is like a texture and taste. And also somatosensory cues is important because because of the embodied bodies that we have. So how we perceive our body, which is embodiment. The sense of having a body is embodiment, and embodied interactions with messages agents will give more engagement feeling with those messages and agents. Lastly, there is also important concept engagement through presence. The presence, as I said, it is different from immersion, but they are very closely related. So immersive technologies with high fidelity cues can elicit high presence, the sense of being there. Okay, and when it is very successful, then people often forget that they are in a mediated space, experiencing something Lombard and Ditton in 1997 said, an illusion of non-mediation. So you feel like you're really there, okay? The medium of the virtual reality actually disappears from the experience. The perception is. So and also the engagement and also presence, their relationship is very important. And as I said in my 2017 article, which I studied the TV advertising engagement, I examined, and also the results showed that the presence experience in advertising encouraged the consumers to feel as if they were a part of action, feel connected to the brand, and experience the ad as if it were real, and feel as if they were experiencing the ad even after the ad experience, therefore ultimately inducing the high engagement. The high engagement actually was connected to better advertising outcomes, attitude toward advertising, attitude toward brand, and some social sharing intention and motivations. So all sorts of good things can happen when there are high engagement. So this is like a little preview of what the metaverse in the world, metaverse looks like, based on those three different kind of parts: consumer, engagement, and media. And between consumer and media, consumer and engagement and media, there are multiple things happening. Okay, and then and this is one metaverse, and there are multiple metaverse platforms. This is one metaverse platform, and there are multiple metaverse platforms, and all collectively together we call them as metaverse. And for me as advertising researcher, the brand is very important. But for PR practitioners and academicians, we can think this as organization, okay, or anything that public relations is concerned on. So that the source can place their message in the media, and then media should be immersive. Therefore, there can be embodiment and presence from the consumer side, which is this. And then media should also have fidelity, high fidelity, and provide high immersion and three kinds of mapping: natural, spatial, and contextual mapping. So there can be more engagement. So those kind of interconnected interactions simultaneously can enhance overall metaverse communication effectiveness. And then when it is interoperable between the physical world and metaverse, then it is very powerful. And there are a lot of things that we need to think about in terms of research from any of these parts. The interaction concurrency is illustrated in this the chart, the figure. The concurrent interaction between consumer 1 and consumer 2, and if there is a brand or organization interconnecting, then the concurrent interaction among those three entities can co-create the meaning of the brand interaction, or the brand or organization perception, which will enhance the field experience in the metaverse to be positive. And this is also the physical world and the K number of metaverse platforms, how consumer and brand should be, the experience should be integrated to be as one as possible, which is a tenet of integrated marketing communications, right? That the meaning co-created between consumer and brand throughout K metaverse platform should be consistent. And also it should be also consistent with the interaction in the actual physical world as well. So the research agenda, there are more than this, but these are some of the research agenda that I thought important, so I put them in my editorial. If you can read it, that's going to be great. So we talked about conceptualization of metaverse and interoperability. We talked about it. Some structuralist, the functionalist, and information processing approach, the theories relevant to those kind of things. We talked about it, and the the evaluation KPIs, how we can develop the key performance indicators for PR and advertising in the metaverse is also important. Cross-cultural aspects, ethical and privacy issues, all sorts of things are worth exploring by the researchers. So there are some
Professor Kim,
cautions.
sorry if I interrupt you, because we are approaching the end of the webinar, so the time is,
okay.
you know,
okay.
we have, if you can go back to the previous slide, I can exploit that slide about the research agenda, because we have one question for you that is about the ethical and privacy issues. So what do you think are the ethical implications or risk of the metaverse?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Metaverse is digital world, so we need to be cautious about ethical and privacy issues. I mean, ethical and privacy, we can separate them. I mean, although they're connected. First of all, privacy issues. You know, the way how you interact in the metaverse can be watched by the companies and other avatars and people, and also platform as well. So the privacy issue is very important in the metaverse as well. And also different platforms should be interoperable in terms of privacy enforcement. So the policy should be there. And metaverse is borderless, which means someone from United States can access the same metaverse. Someone from one of the any of the European companies can access the same metaverse platform. And what if there are different kind of laws, like say like a drinking age, you know, tobacco usage and cannabis usage, you know, those kind of different regulations and policies. And then there are virtual bars that can sell virtual alcohol drink. And how can you make sure that, you know, young people don't go in there and drink? Of course, it is virtual still, but you know, you need to control that kind of environment in the metaverse as well. So there are legal and ethical and privacy issues, you know, that can be new to the metaverse that we need to explore.
Okay, so thank you so much. Unfortunately, we have no more time to go more deeply, but I think that it was a very interesting presentation with useful insight and, you know, so food for thoughts, especially for what concerns public relation and communication, willing to explore this topic. So thank you so much. Stefania, I think that we can conclude the webinar, and we thanks a lot of people coming and participating to the webinar. So see you with the next meeting, with the next EUPRERAtalks. So we will wait you for other food for thought. So thank you so much again, Professor Kim, for your time.
Thank you, Professor Kim.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Have a great day. Bye.